Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you that we can come again and study your Torah, read your word. We just thank you so much. We ask you give us ears to hear, eyes to see, and understanding and wisdom in learning about your word. We pray this in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen.
So Exodus 12, verse 43. And Yahuwah said to Moshe and Aaron, "This is the statute of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat of it, but every slave that is bought for money may eat of it, and after you have circumcised it. No foreigner or hired worker may eat of it." So this Passover is for the people, specifically for the people of Yah. It says no foreigner. And in order to not become a foreigner, because at one time we were all foreigners, right? And the key is being in a covenant relationship with Yahuwah. So a foreigner who comes in, he can't just say, "Hey, I'd like to partake with you." And but it says a slave that is bought for money may eat of it after you circumcised him, which I thought was kind of interesting because these people are just coming out of slavery, and I'm wondering if they're like thinking, well, we haven't bought any slaves. Why would we buy slaves? We're just slaves ourselves. So no foreigner or hired worker. So anybody, now I would think for our time, to me, this seems like that Passover is not an evangelistic type of feast. Would you agree with that? Where we don't, unless you actually are in covenant, that you should not partake of the Passover, of the drinking of the wine or juice, and the breaking of the bread. Would you guys agree with that? Because I know we've probably all invited people and had people from the outside come in who are kind of curious or whatever. But according to this, that's not what we're supposed to do. It's only supposed to be for those. Hey, John's here. What do you know? Hey, John. John, what do you think about that?
You're muted.
You're muted. I don't know if you heard me though.
I just showed up. I don't know. I have any opinions.
Oh, about Exodus 12:43, where it says, "No foreigner may eat of it."
Well, that's something we need to figure out what to do.
Yeah,
Not stop being a foreigner and become part of Israel.
that's a good point.
Talk about putting them on the spot, Mike.
That was a good answer.
Stop messing around.
Yep, stop messing around because we were all foreigners at one time.
That's right.
And I think it would mean if you're not a covenant member, you better not partake of it. And we probably shouldn't allow someone who's not a covenant member to partake of it because they're going to be they'll be bringing upon the judgments upon themselves for entering into covenant and not adhering to the covenant.
Yeah, and not
Yeah.
understanding really what it's about.
So I got a question. So are you saying people that are Christians shouldn't be doing it? Is that is that what you're saying as a foreigner?
They
I would
should,
say a foreigner is an unbeliever.
well, so the foreigner is the person who you have three different categories of this ger or foreigner, or so you've got the one that's just passing through, you got the one that's coming in and staying but not entering into the covenant, and then you got the person that's entering into the covenant and they are just like the native born.
Right.
So the thing is, Gwen, is if a person enters into an oath and a covenant with God Almighty, which is what this meal is, then if they don't do the things that the covenant require, then what's going to come upon them is the curses. And so this is why God's saying, don't, a person that's not entered into covenant status and has decided to take the yoke of the kingdom upon himself should not eat of it. Now they can watch, they can be an observer, but they should not eat of the Passover.
Right.
Unless they're willing to take the yoke of the covenant upon them. Otherwise, we might be guilty of bringing somebody in that's not willing to, do the terms of the covenant.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, because I'm thinking, so what if so the reason why it seems a little confusing, if they are a Christian and they believe, then aren't they a covenant person? Or are you saying a covenant person is one that does Sabbath and so I'm trying to say, how do you make that judgment?
So,
Or
well, and it's not me. So I'm bringing forth what the Almighty says. And so, for example, remember, he said that the people who are not circumcised should not eat of it. And so he says the people that here in chapter 12, we're going to get to here in a minute, he's going to talk about that there's one law for everybody. Well, the law, the Torah that he's talking about, is that covenant that everybody that's eating that Passover should be adherents to that Torah, the covenant. And so you have people that are believers, but you'll have people that may not be totally taking the yoke of the kingdom upon themselves, meaning, like you said, the feast, the Shabbat, and the other things that are in the Torah, that, again, I'm trying to be very careful about not bringing something upon somebody that could bring judgment upon them or upon myself. I want to be sure that I'm not guilty of, because we're seeing this year, well, Polly and I read the book of the blood of the covenant and the threshold covenant and the salt covenant. We have come to an understanding how serious the covenant really is, what it means. And we realized this year, after reading it since last Passover, that the Passover meal is a very, when Yeshua raises the cup and raises the bread, this is a covenant symbol. This is, you're entering into covenant with him to, like he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. So,
and it's just, the covenant's made only one time. Can I just chime in here?
yeah,
The covenant's made only one time, but we are recalling and remembering
remembering,
covenant
yeah.
that we entered into. And so I think if somebody has the information, they understand and they want to participate, that's their decision.
Yeah.
Right.
We tell somebody that chooses that they want to do that.
And so
we would just explain and then let them make that choice.
And so if the person is eating unclean or, doing the things that God, for example, the eating unclean, God says is detestable to him. It's abomination. And so this is just the way I'm walking it out this year. I'm not saying anyone else has to do that. And so this is what I'm getting out of what I've learned this year. And, but again, as always, I could be wrong, but this is what I'm getting out of reading that book, of how serious Passover is and who it's for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to chime in on that? I'm kind of in agreement with Mark there. Because when I read this, it's pretty convicting when you think about it, that what we do at Passover is a very, very serious thing. And because in Christian churches, they have like in the Catholic Church, they do it every Sunday. They have what they call a communion. A lot of churches do it here and there, but I believe that that whole, what they call the Lord's Supper is tied in specifically to Passover, and that's the time that we should be doing. And a little later, I got a little story of how this all ties in with that. Verse 46, it shall be eaten in one house. That means your house or your family, not just one house for all of Israel in one house. You shall not take any of the flesh outside the house, and you shall not break any of its bones. So it's to be eaten in the house and breaking no bones. And you'll recall that Yeshua, when he was being crucified, one of the things that the soldiers would do, they would break the legs of a convict to speed along the death process. And when they came to Yeshua, they noticed he was already dead. So his bones weren't broken. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. So that means if we are in covenant, we are of the congregation of Israel. So it is something that we need to keep.
I wanted to say two things.
Go ahead.
One was, I want to be sure Gwen didn't have any other thoughts or questions. You good?
I'm full of questions, Mark, but I'll just keep listening. And
Okay. And if you want to email me, we can chat back and forth by email or text, and hopefully I know it seems very
it's not like it's because when you're in the church and you come over and you cross over, that's one of the things that they always are exhorting, encouraging, be a part of the Passover, because that's what you're supposed to be doing instead of celebrating Easter. Now we're saying you shouldn't be doing that. So
Shouldn't
I'm
be
not
doing
sure
what?
that we shouldn't be inviting people to partake in the Passover.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to be-
Well, as Mark said, it's okay for people to come and observe. Maybe I didn't state it quite correctly, but
well,
they should be. We should tell them this is what it means, and if
yes,
you do this is what it means for you. So, what Mark is saying,
yes.
we don't want anyone to have this burden put on them when they're not really understanding what it involves.
They're not ready, yeah. or prepared.
So it talks about the person that eats the Passover unworthy has, I can't remember, I would be paraphrasing, but it's a very severe thing. And so the question is, what does the unworthy mean? And so we have had, and everybody has a different understanding about that. But I would say, if you're going to invite people, they need to understand the weight and the seriousness of that Passover meal, that they're entering into a covenant with God, a covenant, which means you're agreeing to something. And if you're entering a covenant and you're agreeing, they need to know the terms of the agreement. Otherwise, it'd be like me coming into a car dealership and them saying, hey, it's all good to go. The contract's in here, and I never get to read it. So they need to know what's the terms of the agreement that they're entering into. And they can watch. If you can watch and observe and not enter the agreement, but when you eat it and you're partaking of it, that's a different story. At least that's what I'm learning about the understanding of this covenant meal back in the day. The understanding that the books have brought across is this is what's happening. And I think maybe that's why that verse says, let no one eat of it unworthy.
Maybe we need to do a word study on the.
And we'll probably have to do a word study on that and mine it out so we can get real clear on it. So,
Well, I think if they're made aware and they choose to do it.
yeah, if
and
they're
want
made
to do
aware
it,
and they choose to do it, then I think that you're not liable for bringing somebody in without letting them know what's happening here, So, but yeah, I think people for sure have to know what's happening.
Yes.
This isn't just some cool thing you're participating in. This is a very weighty, very serious covenant meal.
Does that
Oh, and I
make
wanted to
sense?
also say, I also wanted to say that the reason that this is the one feast that's celebrated in the homes, whereas the other two are celebrated, as a big congregation. So this is why we've chose to celebrate this in our homes, whereas in the years before we were having, 200-300 people coming together. And but it says here in your home. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons we chose to do that.
Verse 48, if a stranger shall sojourn with you and would keep the Passover to Yahuwah, let all his males be circumcised. Then he may come near and keep it. He shall be as a native of the land. But no uncircumcised person shall eat of it. There shall be one law for the native and the stranger who sojourns among you. So whether
This-
you're a native born or a sojourner who keeps covenant, the law of the Torah applies to all. So
in the context of the Passover here, we see God saying that number one, a circumcision, which is a blood covenant, because there's a cutting of flesh and there's blood being spilled. And then we have him saying that there's one Torah for everybody that's celebrating this Passover. Well, if people don't realize that there's a Torah involved here in celebrating the Passover, then they're unaware. And I think we need to make them aware of what's happening, that this is a covenant meal that involves a covenant relationship, reciprocal relationship.
and all the people of Israel did just as Yahuwah commanded Moses and Aaron. And on that day, on that very day, Yahuwah brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their host. So they had their Passover in that evening, leading into the first day of unleavened bread, and that very day they were heading out. (13:1). And Yahuwah said to Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both of man and of beast, is mine. So once again, he's bringing up the consecration of the firstborn, which we had talked about previously. And both of man and of the beast. And I guess the question we asked it last week too is like, is this the firstborn male, or is it just whoever is the first to open the womb? And I don't know for certain myself. I don't know if anybody here knows, but has any thoughts on that? So we'll just continue then. Verse 3, then Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand Yahuwah brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today is the month of Abib. You are going out. And when Yahuwah brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to Yahuwah. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. Leavened bread shall be seen with you, no leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leaven shall be seen with you in your territory. So he mentions the leaven and the unleavened he actually in chapter 12 and 13, he mentions unleavened bread 8 times, and the word for unleavened bread is matzot or matzah. And it's actually first used in Genesis 19:3, which is the story of the 2 angels who went to Sodom, and they are greeted by Lot, and he brings them in and makes a meal for them, and he serves them unleavened bread. And just previously to that, that was when the 3 people came to Abraham's tent, and he made a meal for them. So I believe that this was at the Passover time, because that was the time that the Abraham, I'm not sure if he was Abram or Abraham at the time, but he was told that this time next year, Sarah will have a son. And this time next year would be the next year, the next Passover time. So the word matzah, it has it means greedily devouring for sweetness, properly sweetness, concretely sweet. So you kind of get a picture of a baby who's nursing. You know, have you ever seen a baby nursing? They're just like, you know, it's like they're greedy. Not soured or bittered with yeast, specifically unfermented cake or loaf, or the festival of Passover. And actually it comes from a root, matzah. It's a primitive root that means to suck, milk. So that kind of gives the idea of the baby who's nursing. The word for unleavened bread, there's actually 2 words. One is sa'ar, and that's the one used in verse 7, the second one. And the other one is hametz. So hametz is unleavened bread. Matzah is leavened bread.
You know, it might be a good idea for us to read Jeremiah 38, the first 10 verses in the Septuagint, since it's talking about the future Passover to come. I'll read it for you.
Go ahead.
It says, "At that time said Yahweh, I will become a God to the race of Israel, and they shall become a people to me. Thus did Yahweh say, I found him warm in a wilderness with people that perish by dagger. Go and do not destroy Israel. Then Yahweh appeared to him from afar away. I have loved you with an everlasting love, therefore I have drawn you into compassion." There's our word hesed in here being used in verse 3. "Again I will build you, and you shall be built, O virgin Israel. Again you shall take your tambourine and go forth with the gathering of jesters. Again you shall plant vineyards on the mountains of Samaria, plant and praise, because it is a day of calling of people who argue in the mountains of Ephraim. Rise up and go up to Zion, to Yahweh our Elohim, because thus did Yahweh say to Jacob, be glad and nigh for the head of nations. Make heard and give praise. Say, Yahweh saved his people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I am bringing them from the north. I will gather them from the farthest part of the earth at the feast of Passover. And you will breed a large crowd, and they shall return here. With weeping they went out, and with consolation I will bring them up." So, pretty cool
Yeah.
vision of what's to come.
You should talk to Bob, because he brought that up to me because he heard us saying it a couple Shabbats ago, but he has some interesting thoughts on that. I'm not really quite sure what they are though. But
Does he not think it's Passover?
I'm not, I think, yeah, I think that's it. I'm not really sure. He
Huh.
thought it was something else, but I don't
Huh.
really, he wasn't exactly clear on it, so I don't really know.
Yeah, it's clearly the Greek word for Passover, so. Yeah, and it actually has the word feast in there, so we know
Yeah.
it's a hog. Yeah.
Hey, Mike.
Uh-huh.
You had wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts about the firstborn being just male or female. So I don't know, people might want to study this out a little bit, but I recall something about Mary. She may have been the firstborn. I'm not positive, but I think I
Mary,
remember,
the mother of Yeshua.
yes, the mother of Yeshua, and her parents were Joachim and Anna. And I think they had prayed because they were childless. So they had prayed fervently. And I think the story is that Mary was their child later on in life. And then Mary was actually brought to the temple where she learned a lot of Yah's ways. So I'm wondering if she may have been considered a firstborn.
Hmm.
So that's my thoughts on that.
That's interesting. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Well, as we go on, it kind of describes it a little more in the middle part of 13. But, let's continue reading. Well, I also wanted to say about the leaven. Leaven is basically it's just fermentation. So when you it's comes from the root hametz. It's to be pungent, as in taste, sour, literally fermented, or figuratively harsh. In color, dazzling, which I found pretty interesting. That's like saying Paul's painting is leaven. That's a very leaven painting you have, Paul. It has dazzling color. Barm, does anyone know what barm is? It's the yeast formed on malt liquors while fermenting.
Say again?
Barm, have you ever heard of barm? B-A-R-M.
What verse are you on?
No, I'm just reading definitions that I found.
Oh,
I actually had to look it up, but it's yeast that's formed on malt liquors while fermenting. Because you know that beer is from a fermented process. There's a few. It's a type of yeast, yeah. And then I looked up yeast, a yellowish, somewhat viscid, semi-fluid froth or sediment consisting of the cells of certain minute fungi. Doesn't sound very good. Used to induce fermentation in the manufacture of alcoholic beverages, especially beer, as a leaven in dough, which you know how they make leaven bread, and in medicine. So I read that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, medicine? I don't want leaven in my medicine. That kind of puts a whole new spin on it. So the definition of leaven is an agent or element that acts in or upon something to produce a gradual change or modification. So when you think of leaven in terms of like sin, when sin enters your life or it enters the community, it's usually a like a gradual thing. I mean, you can see how in our culture, you know, we're at the point we are where, you know, 30, 40 years ago,
You gonna look that up?
would have imagined the way the world is today would be like this. Does somebody have a comment? I heard somebody. Does somebody have a question? Oh, was that you, Pat? Okay. So let me continue reading here. Unleavened bread shall not be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory. So he really stresses in this portion for chapters 12 and 13 the idea of leaven and unleavened. He states over and over, and then other places in the Torah that 7 days you eat unleavened bread. Don't let any leaven be found in your house or be seen with you. It's like you're carrying leaven around or something. Don't let leaven be seen with you. And no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory. That means the whole land, they're getting all the leaven out. You shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what Yahuwah did for me when I came out of Egypt. So that's telling your children it's a personal thing. He did this for me, not just the whole community, but for me personally. And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand, because we do the acts of the Torah, and a memorial between your eyes. Memorial or remembrance is the word zakaron, which has the word zakar, which means remember. So it's a memorial or it's a remembrance between your eyes. And what's between your eyes? Your gray man. So you have to think about it. I have to think of a joke here.
What did you say the Hebrew word for?
Memorial? Zakaron?
So mine says the Hebrew word used here is frontlet, which is,
Oh, yeah. I think that's a little later. Totafot.
yeah.
Yeah. This one is memorial, Zakaron. I think that's down in a little later in the chapter.
Which one, which verse
I
you
think
want?
that's in verse 16, yeah. This is verse 9.
Oh, I see it, yeah.
Oh, Gary told me a joke. He said, what did the left eye say to the right eye?
I know.
Oh, go ahead. He told you too, huh? You want to say?
Something between us smells.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you knew it because I was going to say it wrong. That's right. There's something between us smells. Only Gary could. So shall be a sign on your hand and a memorial between your eyes, that the law of Yahuwah may be in your mouth. So we do the acts of the Torah, and we remember to do the Passover, so that it will be the law will be on our mouth and our mind. You shall therefore keep this statute at its appointed time from year to year. Appointed time is Moed, so the Moedim are the times that we keep the feast. When Yahuwah brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and shall give it to you, you shall set apart to Yahuwah all that first opens the womb. All the firstborn of your animals that are males shall be Yahuwah's. Every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. I assume that the lamb and not the donkey. I'm not really sure. And when it comes,
Interesting. The word here for males is Zekarim. Sounds a lot like Zekaron, doesn't it?
yeah. Oh, yeah, Zechariah. Well, Zakar is a male, yeah, okay. Well, maybe it is the firstborn male. Because Zakar is male.
And even the Septuagint is using the Greek word for male.
Hmm.
It's funny. The Greek word for male is arsenica.
Is what?
Arsenica.
Arsenica, huh? For, what's that for? A
Wonder if
male?
that comes from arsenic.
What word is that for? A male?
Male, the Greek word for male in this verse is arsenica.
They're definitely related.
Ollie says they're definitely related.
Yep. Every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. So in this case, it is the firstborn son who is redeemed. You sacrifice the firstborn of an animal or redeem it, a donkey with a lamb, but any son would not be sacrificed, he would be redeemed. And when in time to come your son asks you, what does this mean? You shall say to him, by a strong hand Yahuwah brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. For when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, Yahuwah killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals. Therefore, I sacrifice to Yahuwah all the males that first open the womb. So here's the idea, it's the firstborn male. But all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. It shall be as a mark on your hand or frontlets. This is that other word, frontlets, totafot. For by strong hand Yahuwah brought us out of Egypt. So there's the idea that the firstborn of Egypt were the redeemed of the firstborn sons of Israel. Mark, you have thoughts on?
So was it only the firstborn males that died, or was it firstborn men and women?
Yeah, that's another good question. Well, this part of the passage seems to indicate that it's the firstborn male who's redeemed. And
Yeah, it does in the, I was just looking at the Targum. The Targum says every initial birth.
Yeah, which
So
could be
it's
male or female.
a bit confusing, but yeah. But the English and the Masoretic make it very clear it's a male. And so does the Septuagint.
So I wanted to tell you a little story here. And I started talking about it last week about Polycarp. And I said he was bishop of Ephesus, but I was wrong. He was bishop of Smyrna. But there was this thing, it was called the Quartodeciman controversy. That's what they called it. And quartodeciman means 14 in Latin. And Polycarp, he lived about, he was born about 69 and he lived to about 155. He was bishop of Smyrna, and he was actually a direct disciple of the Apostle John. So he has a connection, you know, if you could imagine you were able to live in the time of Yeshua and you heard him speak and teach. I suppose the next best thing would be, you know, being taught by a direct disciple of Yeshua. So in the first part of the first or second century, the bishop of Rome, his name was Anicetus, and the controversy basically involved when do you celebrate the Passover, because Polycarp, because he learned from John, he believed that the time this was on this, to celebrate it was the 14th day of Nisan, hence the word quartodeciman. And they were called, kind of in a derogatory way, 14ers. Quartodecimani. And so he got together with this Bishop of Rome, Antacides, and they discussed this issue, but neither one, because the bishop in Rome and a lot of other places, they believe that they should celebrate it on the Sunday of, I believe, whenever they celebrate Easter. Don't they celebrate the first Sunday after the equinox? I'm not really sure. Usually it's, I was raised Catholic, but usually it's around the Sunday around Passover. But they couldn't come to an agreement, but they basically decided to agree to disagree, and they remained civil and friends. But later in it, by about the 190s, there were a number of people who believed, were going more and more wanting to celebrate it on this Sunday. And the churches in Asia Minor, they were all more or less celebrating it the traditional Passover day, whereas the Romans were led by the church in Rome, were moving towards a which we would call Easter, right? Although they didn't really call it Easter back then. So by the 190s, they were thinking. So this is kind of how leaven works, little by little, right? So by 193, the Bishop of Rome at the time was this guy named Victor, and he writes a letter to another Polycrates. See, I had my polys mixed up. I said Polycarp, but it's actually the guy Polycrates. He was the Bishop of Ephesus. So Victor writes him a letter saying that we're going to go, all the churches are going to go and celebrate on Easter or on this Sunday. So he gets a council of his own in Ephesus, attended by all the bishops in Asia Minor. And so they rejected Victor's authority and kept the province's paschal tradition. So good for them, right? And so he writes a letter back to Victor, and part of his letter reads, "We observe the exact day, neither adding nor taking away. And I also, Polycrates, the least of you all, do according to the tradition of my relatives. For 7 of my relatives were bishops, and I am the 8th. And my relatives always observe the day when the people put away the leaven. I therefore, brethren, who have lived 65 years in Yahuwah and have met with the brethren throughout the world and have gone through every holy scripture and not affrighted by terrifying words. For those greater than I have said, we ought to obey God rather than man." So Victor didn't like this a whole lot. So his reaction was to, well, at least he tried to excommunicate Polycrates and all the bishops in Asia Minor and all the churches. But other bishops stepped in, including Irenaeus, who is a fairly well-known, and he was the bishop in Lyon. He interceded and he reversed his decision. But by 325, as we probably all know, the Council of Nicaea is where Constantine, he basically put an end, and he put into law that all the churches would practice the Easter holiday, right? And that's just kind of a idea how leaven, it starts with just this thought, because people weren't adhering or reading the word and seeing when is the day to celebrate, and they changed to Sundays. And it really came down to an issue of the calendar, because Polycarp and Polycrates, they believed that we should follow the Jewish calendar, the Jewish months. And so So that means Passover, it could be, depending on the year, any day of the week, right? Whereas the Roman Church, and as we know, eventually with Constantine, he was the emperor. I don't believe he was a pope, though, really. I don't really know exactly when the first pope came about, but that just kind of put in law that no, we're going to do it this way, and that's that. And the rest, as they say, is history. But we can see how just this little thing, because they were following the Julian calendar, which is, I think it's the same as the Gregorian, but I believe, wasn't the Julian calendar started in March? And then I don't know, and then the Gregorian calendar changed the first of the year to January.
Yeah, and the thing about the two calendars is they both shared the same, what the Julian called the first day of the week,
Yeah,
the Gregorian picked up the same idea, the same first day. So in other words,
yeah,
when the Gregorian came along, they didn't change the first day of the week to now the first day is the fourth. The first day stayed the same, even though names may have changed. It was still the 1 through 7 stayed the same.
yeah. But they changed the day, they changed the Shabbat to Sunday, basically, and they moved it from where it should be, and they took the Passover and converted it into a Easter holiday, and that led to what we have now, which is a total perversion of what it, what Passover should be. So
Curious to ask if Polycarp learned from John like how to begin the year,
yeah,
like the equinox and then conjunction, like
yeah. I don't know if Polycarp was Jewish himself or if he was Greek. Sounds like a Greek name to me. But I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of Greek believers like us. Essentially, you could say we're Greek believers, right? In a sense, we're not native born Israelites. We're all sojourners, sojourning in a strangers in a strange land, as they say. So
but do you think that information's out there?
yeah, it is. I'm pretty sure you could read up on all these guys. But nothing much has changed, really. I mean, they already, by the end of the first century, it was already, uh, heading in that direction. And little bit of leaven.
I wonder about the yeast. I have a question. They must have. I have a question about the yeast.
Yeah,
So
the yeast.
yeah, the yeast.
Oh, okay.
They probably knew that if they made some, started making bread, but they didn't use yeast, but if they just left it out for a day or two, it would start developing as if it had the yeast because it does have the yeast. I mean, they must have known that yeast was everywhere. I mean, even if you cleaned it out of your house, it was still in your house. It's on the walls,
Right.
it's on the ceiling,
It's
it's
an
in the
airborne
air,
thing, yeah.
it's in the ground, it's on the fruit. It's literally everywhere. So I wonder if they took that into account in this teaching. They were getting rid of it, yet it readily comes back by
Yeah.
itself.
Well, sin doesn't go away, does it? You
Right. That's kind of what I
really
was,
have to fight it and root it out.
yeah.
It's
It
a
readily comes
battle.
back.
And that's probably why they had to cook it in haste, do it
Right.
quick so it wouldn't get infected. Because you're right, it's everywhere, I mean, it's in the air. So. Any other comments? Now we can, if we at least read to the end of the chapter. That's actually after verse 16, that's the end of the Parashah Bo. And then it starts the Parashah Be Shalach, which means, find it here. Be Shalach, when you let go, let the people go. Verse 17, when Pharaoh let the people go, that's Be Shalach, he let the people go. God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt, equipped for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here. And they moved on from Sukkot and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. So their first stop, Sukkot. So when they leave, they just got basically what they could take with them immediately. So going to Sukkot, they would have just built themselves booths or huts in order to spend the night. So they don't go directly back to the land because Yahuwah thought maybe they would change their mind when they run into the people who are living there. So he takes them kind of the roundabout way, and as we know, it turned out to be a very roundabout way, and towards the Red Sea.
So interesting, in verse 19, the English says, God will surely take care of you. Two things. Joseph obviously knew that God was a covenant, was a God that was into covenant loyalty, and he would take care of his people. But that word is in Hebrew can also mean to visit. So
Yeah,
maybe Joseph knew that God would visit them in their time of need and fulfill his vows to their father Abraham. So very interesting.
yeah, this English translation does say visit. The code.
And remember, Yeshua said that they didn't recognize the time of their visitation.
Right.
And here we have a Passover visitation, and Yeshua a Passover visitation, and Jeremiah in the Septuagint says we're going to have another one in the future.
Yeah. So Joseph is kind of a line. He kind of bridges a gap because I don't believe any of the other patriarchs, other than of the brothers, that is, other than Joseph, was buried in the land. And I don't know if Ephraim and Manasseh were still alive by that time. So you have all the patriarchs now buried in the land. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and now Joseph.
And out of the ones that came out of Egypt, just Joshua and Caleb.
Yeah, that's all. They're the only two that made it out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And Joshua was an Ephraimite.
Makes you wonder, all those 600,000 bones that are scattered all through the wandering area.
Yeah.
Somehow they're still there.
Yep. And Yahuwah went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. So the whole 40-year span, this pillar of cloud and fire was with them. So the cloud, I kind of envision it. I always just envision like a big cloud going up, but apparently it was like a big spread out cloud that provided shade for them. Yeah, I see Pat nodding her head. You agree?
I agree.
And the pillar of fire, so that they could see at night. So why don't we stop right there? And next week we'll go on crossing the Red Sea, chapter 14. Does anybody have anything else they would like to say? Any questions?
Any olive tovs in there, John?
Yeah, with the, oh, did I close that? When you started talking about the unleavened bread,
Yeah.
let me look here real quick. Verse 7, 13:7. Unleavened bread shall be eaten olive tov 7 days,
Yeah.
nothing be seen.
Yeah. So between Eaton and 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Standalone olive tov, yeah.
And yet we have Yeshua, the olive tov, telling us that we are to eat his flesh and drink his blood.
So in the next chapter,
There's one in verse 10 too. Therefore you shall keep olive tov, the statute of this appointed time.
is it a standalone olive tov?
Yeah.
No, it's got a, I forget what they call it, but
A
it's,
dash after it.
yeah.
The other one does too. I don't
No,
know.
it didn't.
No, the one John's referring to has nothing next to it.
Let me call you in a minute.
If you go to the next chapter,
Oh, I see what you mean.
verse, what is this, 13? No, 14:24.
It's between to make noise and camp.
Yeah, and so through the pillar of fire and the cloud and troubled olive tov, the host Egyptians.
There's
And then
two in
the
that
next
verse.
verse, 25.
Wait, there's 2 in 24. No, I'm sorry, you're right. It's in 25.
Yeah, 25 says, and he took off olive tov the wheels of their chariot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool stuff. I always enjoy the olive tov standalone.
If you
Okay.
look at them, if you go onto My Hebrew Bible, you can see them there. They're
So that's a standalone olive tov. It has to be just the olive and the top.
yeah, no vav in front of it, no hyphen.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Hebrew hyphen, I don't know what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it means.
Well, you guys don't know what it means because mine, in the Sefer, it has the olive top a lot,
Yeah.
and I never understood what that meant.
Well, so it says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, right? In Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So in Hebrew, what is that?
Olive top.
The olive and top, but how come it's like in these seemingly random spots in the verses? Like, what is that signifying?
Well, the idea is that it's Messiah hidden in the scriptures, but I'm only looking at standalone olive tops. There's no
Okay.
some
Okay.
of them have like a bunch of hyphens and stuff like that. There's 600.
So I didn't know that.
There's 633 standalone olive tops, 612 verses.
Beth Moore knows. She has her hand up. Go ahead, Beth.
Oh, I learned about the olive tub. Besides, we you think that it's Yeshua, Aleph, and Tav, but in biblical Hebrew, the Aleph Tav also is called DDO, definite direct object. So it's, I can't explain, but it's like when something or someone is the object, the Aleph Tav is put first, is written first to signify who's doing the action or who's receiving the action or something like that. So grammatically, it's a DDO.
Mhm.
It's giving a lot of attention to the next word.
Yeah.
It's like highlight. Look at this next word. Look at this.
Well, if you go to the very first verse, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the Hebrew, it's beginning is Bereshit, created is bara, Elohim, and then it's the standalone Aleph Tav.
Yeah.
It's not saying the creation created God. It's God created the heavens and the earth.
And in that verse, the Aleph Tav is the fourth word, isn't it?
It's the middle word.
Yeah.
And
And then the Vav Aleph Tav is in between heavens and the earth.
So it's the Shemesh in the menorah. It's the middle of the seven. It's like the fourth day of the week. It's a lot of hidden meanings in that.
Yeah, and you could this the sixth word is Va'et, the heavens, Va'et, the earth, and the earth, and the et, that's an Aleph Tav, but it has the Vav, which is the nail. So it's between the sixth and the seventh, or it's between the fifth and the seventh word.
Yeah.
So you can go crazy with this. And
Yeah. The Vav is the 22nd letter,
22nd,
I believe.
oh, the Vav, you mean
The Vav, the
the 22nd letter?
think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, you're counting the letters?
10,
Okay.
11, 12,
But what's interesting is how do you spell sign? How do you spell oat?
Oat, Aleph Tav.
Vav.
Vav Tav. So technically, when Yeshua said, I am the Aleph and the Tav, he would have said Aleph Va Tav.
Oh,
He
yeah,
would
yeah.
have been spelling oat, meaning I am the sign.
Yeah.
So if you said, give me a sign, you would say, oh.
You would say Aleph and
Give
Tav.
me a
Yeah.
sign that you're the Messiah. Okay.
Yeshua.
Aleph Va Tav.
I'll be on the lookout more for the standalone Aleph Tavs, because I
Well,
didn't.
like I said, if you go to my website, myhebrewbible.com, you go through the chapters, it'll
tell you each one.
It'll show you in red letters.
Yeah, he puts
red
it in
letter
red.
Hebrew.
Oh,
It's his website,
Oh.
myhebrewbible.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So if you click the numbers that has the Vav, you can't do a share screen. That's what.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got it highlighted in red. It's real easy to find it and see
But
it.
you have to click the verse, and it drops down a modal window to show you the Hebrew letters and
Can
even
you
the
do a share screen real quick, John?
I don't know.
My phone here. All right,
But if you need a puppy,
I'll be good. Unless you want to just call Bell from my phone and I'll take yours. I'll be right back. I don't want to just want to get it over with. So I can,
okay, gas up and bring the mail back.
so gas.
The mail.
Ward might have to,
Stay on there, Coffee. Stay on till the end, all right?
Mm-hmm.
okay, now you can do it.
So how do I do that? Share screen. I want to share this guy. You see that?
oh, yeah.
Yep.
So my Hebrew Bible up here, it'll redirect to this Azure website things, but just type in myhebrewbible.com. And then you'll see right here. First of all, I tell you how many there are at the top. Can you see my mouse?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So this one in this chapter has 1, and it's in the first verse. So you got to click the number Let me, can I make this bigger here?
We can see it.
I don't want to mess this up. Okay, I'll just do. So you click the number, and then you see it's in Hebrew word order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Hmm.
And then in the English, obviously, in the beginning created God. And then here, there isn't a word because there is no translation in Hebrew. And the heavens and the earth. So, and over here, it has a link to the Strong's number, which I need to update these. But anyway.
So a perfect example is that sixth word, it's not a standalone Aleph Tav because it's got a Vav in front of it.
Right.
Right. So let's say, where were we? We're at Exodus. And I need to work on this website. So
Exodus
bear with me.
13:7.
If I go Exodus, the abbreviation, just go 13. Don't type in the verse number because it's not smart enough to figure that out.
There's 3.
Oh.
Yeah, there's 1 and 7.
3 of them.
3.
Is that
What
what
do you-
that says? 13,
It's the
7?
third word. No, that means the third word.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So
There's
you
the
go
one
down
with
here,
7.
and then you see unleavened bread shall be eaten standalone Aleph Tav 7 days.
Yeah, nice.
If you want to look at the next chapter, we looked at the other chapter, you just go over here to 14. And you see how it's got 2 that listed up there. So you go down, you find those. One of them's in 24,
Ah.
and the other one's in. Now, if you don't want, if you're clicking and it doesn't have a standalone, you can still click like here. Here, let's do this one, 21. You can still look at the Hebrew words. In fact, look at there. There's an Aleph Tav, but guess why isn't it not standalone?
Yeah.
Because it's got that little Hebrew hyphen right there. But what I'm trying to say is every Hebrew word, every verse has the Hebrew in it. And also, let me show one more thing. Can you see like here stretched out? This here?
Yeah.
The first letter is a Vav, but what do you notice that's different than the other letters? It's lighter. That Vav is a lighter letter.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Strong's number is telling you
It's based on the black letters without the gray
right,
letter.
the Yod and the Tet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's another one right here. It's got a Vav. So the source I had all that stuff in there. So I thought that was pretty cool. It highlights the root.
Yeah. Yeah. Grays out the letter that's not part of the root.
Right.
Hmm.
That's good.
Is there, hey, John, when you were doing that, you said there is no pronunciation for that?
Well, there's a pronunciation in the English. There's no like, yeah, you would if you were. Let me go back to the Genesis.
In the Hebrew, it's et.
Yeah. But with the hyphen in it, is that pronounced? You wouldn't pronounce it if you were reading this in Hebrew, you would not read that word, right?
Right.
Okay.
You just say, in the beginning created God,
Right.
the heaven, the earth.
So with the hyphen, would you say it then?
No.
Or you still don't say it? Okay.
Well, you would, yeah, you don't say it in English. In Hebrew, you would just say et, just like you would with, you can't make it, you wouldn't be able to know the difference listening to someone. You don't say et hyphen, you just say et.
Right.
Hebrew hyphen.
Gotcha. Great, thank you.
Yep.
Hebrew hyphen.
Unshare?
Interesting stuff. I did not know that. All right.
Appreciate everybody joining tonight. What a nice time and
Yeah. Thank
good
you, John.
participation.
Mark, I sent you a link on the fencing project.
Yeah.
Did you get it? I just want to let you know.
You sent me a link?
In email, yeah.
Okay. Thank
Check
you.
it out.
Okay, well, I'm going to close with a word of prayer and then
Okay,
Want to hang out, you can. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for this lesson tonight, and it's always awesome just to learn something new like that. And Father, I thank you so much for all your blessings, all your hesed and hen that you direct our way et to us. And thank you. Pray all this in Yeshua's name. Amen.